we are Group 3.
Our topic is about economic foundation. So in this presentation, we will provide a comprehensive overview of micro and macroeconomic concepts, which discusses the impact of economic conditions on companies. We will also emphasize the importance of understanding microeconomics and macroeconomics for strategic planning. To start with, let me first define what economics is. Economics is the study of how to best allocate scarce resources or limited resources to satisfy humans' unlimited wants and needs. And there are two main branches of economics, microeconomics and macroeconomics. So now let's first discuss microeconomics. From the word micro, it means small or individual scale. Therefore, microeconomics focuses on the decisions and actions of individual agents, such as businesses or customers within the economy. So, if you want to be a financial manager in the future, you need a strong foundation in microeconomics because it helps managers understand the market for the company's products and services, including pricing considerations. So the main topics we will cover in microeconomics are supply, demand, and equilibrium. Demand refers to the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices during a given time period. Ceteris paribus, a Latin phrase meaning all other things being equal. It means that except for the price, no other economically relevant factors are changing or can affect the demand. And according to law of demand, when the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. And when the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. So as stated in the law of demand, the price and the quantity demanded for the product or service have an inverse relationship. So to show the law of demand, we will use a demand schedule and a demand curve to properly illustrate the inverse relationship between prices and quantity demanded. Demand schedule a table that shows the quantity demanded of a good or service at different price levels. This example is a demand schedule for the demand of candy. With this demand schedule, you can see the quantity demanded for different prices of candies. When the price of candy is 1 pesos, the quantity demanded is 50. While when the price of candy becomes 5 pesos, it makes the quantity demanded decreases from 50 to 10. For marketing teams or other administration, demand schedules may be useful to help determine which price is most appealing to sell their products or services. Demand curve, a graphical representation of the relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity demanded for a given period of time. Sometimes the demand curve is also called a demand schedule because it is a graphical representation of the demand schedule. As you can see, the graph is an example of demand curve for the candy. The line you see in the graph which connects the points is the demand curve, and this curve is called downward sloping curve. It is the reflection of how the quantity demanded is inversely proportional to the price of candy, and this inverse relationship is referred to as the law of demand. And if other factors relevant to demand do change, then the entire demand curve will shift. A shift in the demand curve occurs when the whole demand curve moves to the right or left. So the demand curve shifts when the quantity of a product or service demanded at each price level changes. If the quantity demanded at each price level increases, the demand curve shifts rightward. Inversely, if the quantity demanded at each price level decreases, the demand curve will shift leftward. As I said earlier, the shift in the demand curve only occurs when there are other economic factors that can affect the demand curve, such as consumer income, the size of the population. Next is supply, the quantity of a good or service that firms are willing to sell at various prices during a given time period, ceteris paribus. According to law of supply, as price increases, quantity supplied increases, and as price falls, quantity supplied falls. So the law of supply states that an increase and decrease in the price of goods or services also results in an increase and decrease in their supply. It only shows that there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. Same with demand. To show the law of supply, we will use a supply schedule and supply curve to properly illustrate how the quantity supplied will respond to various prices over a period of time. Supply schedule, a table that shows the quantity supplied at each price. If the demand schedule shows the quantity demanded for different prices of candies, here in the supply schedule you can see the different prices of candies and the number of candies seller can or will supply at the price. When the price of candy is as low as 1 pesos, sellers will only supply 10 candies at the price. And when the price of candy increases to 5 pesos, sellers will supply 50 candies available to sell. Supply curve is a graphical depiction of the supply schedule that illustrates the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supplied. As you can see in the supply curve, higher prices encourage suppliers to sell more candies. Therefore, the supply curve will be upward sloping because there is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. Note that when the curve is drawn, the ceteris paribus assumption is used, assuming that no relevant economic factors other than the service or product's price are changing, and if other factors relevant to supply do change, then the entire supply curve will shift. Shift in the supply curve occurs when supply is affected by something other than a change in the price customers are willing to pay. The supply curve shifts to the left or right. A shift to the right indicates an increase in supply, and a decrease in supply will be represented by a shift in the supply curve to the left. The common factors affecting the supply curves are changes in cost of production, price of related goods or services, technology, seller expectations, natural events, and the number of sellers. Next is equilibrium. It is a state in which market supply and demand balance each other. As a result, prices become stable. Since demand represents buyers and supply represents sellers, in the market, these two groups interact to determine the price and the quantity of the goods that are sold. And that is the point at which the demand and supply curves in the market intersect. And to determine the equilibrium price, it's important to figure out at what price the demand and supply curves intersect. The graph here is the example of demand and supply curve showing equilibrium price and quantity. The point at which the supply and demand curves intersect is known as the equilibrium. At the equilibrium price, the quantity demanded will equal exactly the quantity supplied. There is no shortage or surplus of the product. As you can see in the graph, when the price of candy is 3 pesos, the demand curve represents consumers wanting to purchase 30 candies, and the supply curve represents sellers also wanting to make 30 candies available for purchase. So with that, it shows that the market is in balance. And what if the price of a candies were 4 pesos, which is a price higher than equilibrium price? So with that, the suppliers would make 40 candies available, but the quantity of candies demanded would be only 20 candies. And this situation will lead to a surplus or excess quantity supplied of candies. Inversely, when the price of candy is 1 pesos, a price below the equilibrium price, consumers may want to purchase 50 candies, but sellers would only want to sell 10 candies at that low price. Since 1 pesos is a price below the equilibrium price, shortage will occur because quantity demanded will exceed quantity supplied. Changes in equilibrium price. A price that is either too high above the equilibrium price or too low below the equilibrium price is not sustainable in a competitive market. Market forces pull prices to the equilibrium, where they stay until either supply or demand changes. Based on the left graph, if supply increases and the curve moves to the right, then the equilibrium price will fall. In supply 1, which is the original supply curve, the equilibrium price was 3 pesos. At that price, quantity demanded and quantity supplied were both 30. In supply 2, there is an increase in the supply of candies. So the equilibrium moves from equilibrium 1 to equilibrium 2. In E2, the price will be 2 pesos, and because there is a change in equilibrium price, the quantity demanded and quantity supplied of candies both became 40, because an increase in supply will cause the equilibrium price to fall. Therefore, quantity demanded will increase. It is important to note that the demand curve does not move, so it does not change. As the equilibrium price falls, consumers move along the demand curve to a point with a combination of a lower price and a higher quantity. Economists call this movement an increase in quantity demanded. Distinguishing between an increase in quantity demanded, a movement along the demand curve, and an increase in demand, a shift in the demand curve, is critical when analyzing market equilibriums. For the right graph, it shows that aside from increase in supply, equilibrium price will also fall if demand falls. And as I discussed earlier, a decrease in demand is represented as a shift of the demand curve to the left. In the graph here on the right, you can see how a decrease in demand causes a change from E1 to E2. At the new equilibrium, which is E2, the price of a candy is 2 pesos, and the new equilibrium quantity is 20 candies. Note that the supply curve has not moved. Producers or sellers move along their supply curve, producing or selling fewer candies as the price drops. This is known as a decrease in quantity supplied.
Now, we proceed to macroeconomics and business cycle. What is macroeconomics? Macroeconomics, it deals with the economic issue that affect the entire economy and most of society, such as the inflation rate, unemployment, and growth of production. Macroeconomics is the branch of economic theory that consider the overall environment in which businesses operate. What is inflation rate? Inflation rate, when it comes to economists talk about inflation, they are discussing this phenomenon of the price of many things rising. Instead of tracking the price of one particular item, they consider the price of purchasing a basket of goods. Inflation means that the purchasing power of currency falls. Here is the example graph of inflation rate in the Philippines from March 2023 to March 2024. In March 2023, the percentage of the inflation is risen to 7.8%, and the next year, which is March 2024, the inflation rate has fallen from 3.7% and it is not that high like the last year. Now we proceed to unemployment. Unemployment is a measure of people who are not working, for the individuals who find themselves without a job. Unemployment causes financial hardship. From a macroeconomic standpoint, unemployment means that society has labor resources that are not being fully utilized. And here is the unemployment rate of the Philippines from 2019 to February 2024. Next is growth of productions or gross domestic product or GDP. GDP is the total value of everything produced within a country's borders. When economists talk about the size of the economy, they are referring to GDP growth rates. It also uses monthly economic indicators such as employment, real personal income, industrial production, and retail sales. The table shows the example of gross domestic product of the Philippines from year 2019 to 2023. In the year 2019 to 2020, the growth rate from quarter 1 to quarter 4 are negative 0.7, negative 16.9, negative 11.6, negative 8.12, and negative 3.8, which is lower, and from 2020 to 2023, the growth rate risen, and the growth rate of the Philippines from 2023 quarter 4 is 5.6%. Now let's move on to business cycle. What is business cycle? The business cycle is the natural rise and fall of economic growths that occurs over time. The cycle is a useful tool for analyzing the economy and can help you make better financial decisions. The duration of a business cycle is the period containing one expansion and contraction in sequence. One complete business cycle has four phases, which is the expansion, peak, contraction, and true. What is expansion? Expansion, an economic expansion, is a period of growth throughout an economy because productivity is increasing. It is generally represented on a curve as an upward movement. In some cases, the expansion phase is also known as the economic recovery phase because it occurs after economy has contracted for a long period. Next is peak. The peak is the second phase of the cycle. It occurs when all of the expansionary indicators begin to level off before heading into contraction. The economy might take weeks or a year to transition into the contraction phase. The GDP growth rate falls below 2% and continues to decline. The peak is displayed on a graph as the highest portion of the curve before moving downward. The third phase is the contraction stage. It begins after the economy peaks and ends when GDP and other indicators cease to decrease. In this stage, the economy does not experience growth. Instead, it shrinks. When the GDP rate turns negative, the economy enters a recession. Business lay off employee, the employment rate rises above normal level, and prices begin to decline. A contraction is generally portrayed on a graph as the part of the curve that is consistently decreasing. And lastly, the trough. The trough is the fourth phase of the business cycle. The declining GDP begins to decrease its rate of negative change, eventually turning positive again. The economy begins a transition from the contraction phase to the expansion phase. A trough is displayed on a graph as the lowest point of the curve. The business cycle begins again when GDP begins to increase and the curve moves upward consistently.
Hello everyone, I am Queen and our next topic is interest rate. If you bought a car, get a school loan, use credit card, and purchase a home, basically, interest rate is the cost of borrowing money, or we can think of it as a rental price. If the interest rise, the cost of borrowing money is higher. Mortgage repayments cost more, and there are more incentives for people to save. These higher rates also increase the value of the currency and cause falls in the consumption and investments. When the interest rates are low, more people willing to borrow because it is easy to pay debt. However, when the interest rates are high, people are reluctant to borrow money because it is more difficult to pay debt. Foreign exchange is the value of one currency for the purpose of conversion to another. It determines how much of one currency you can change for another, indicating how much of the currency you need to buy one unit of another currency. For example, you travel to foreign countries, but you needed first to go to the bank to exchange money for your food, hotel, and other necessities. So that's basically can foreign exchange works. Next is currency appreciation. It occurs when it costs more to purchase a currency than did it before. When the peso appreciates, it means that the people can buy imported goods and exchange currency at lower price. And it also causes either an increase in the demand for pesos or a decrease in the supply of pesos. Currency depreciation occurs when currency loses value compared to other currencies. When a peso depreciates, it means people have to spend more pesos to buy imported goods. And it also causes peso to depreciate, either a decrease in demand of peso or an increase in supply of peso.
Sources and characteristic of economic data. Economic data is the information used for calculation, analysis, or planning. It is often called economic statistic and considered a quantitative measure that helps to represent the actual economy. The Federal Reserve Economic Data, or FRED, is one of the largest sources of economic data. This database is maintained by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis and contains more than 765,000 economic time series. We can find statistics on employment, inflation, exchange rate, gross domestic product, interest rate, and many other economic variables in FRED database. Although much of the data is about the US market, macroeconomic data from other countries is also available. In the Philippines, we also have several resources we can explore to find economic information. It is the government websites, the Philippine Statistic Authority or PSA, and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP. In the international organizations, we have the World Bank Open Data and the International Monetary Fund or IMF data. For the research institution, we have the Philippine Institute for Development Studies or PIDS. Levels versus percentage changes. Level represent the absolute value of an economic indicator at a specific point in time, while percentage changes express the change in economic indicator relative to its previous level. The table shows the example of gross domestic product of the Philippines from 2016 to 2022. In the first quarter of 2022, the real GDP for the Philippines was 400,103,621,340. In the second quarter, the real GDP had risen to 404,284,326,110. The formula to calculate the percentage change from one quarter to the next is percentage change equals quarter 2 minus quarter 1 divided by quarter 1. Now, if we apply this formula to the GDP of the Philippines in 2022, the total will be 1.05%. Indexes. An index is created to track the performance of a particular aspect of the economy, and it helps to compare the level of a variable at one point in a time relative to another point in a time. The table is an example of Consumer Price Index or CPI. It measures the average change in prices paid by consumers for a basket of goods and services over time. In the year 2020, the stock market index in the Philippines, United States, and Germany had a value of 100. This means that all three markets started at the baseline value in 2020. By 2023, the Philippine index increased to 118. The US index went up to 122, and the German index reached 107. This indicates that all stock markets in all three countries grow between 2020 and 2023, with the Philippines and United States experiencing a slightly higher growth than Germany. Conclusion. In conclusion, we have 6 things to remember about the economic foundation, money, and rate. First, money plays a crucial role in facilitating economic activity, while interest rates are a tool used to navigate the complexities of the economic landscape. By understanding equilibrium and how it responds to changes in demand and supply, we can gain valuable insight into how markets function and how prices are determined. Number 3. The business cycle is a dynamic process. By recognizing the key characteristic of each phase, we can gain a valuable framework for analyzing economic trends and making informed decisions. Number 4. Understanding the interplay between nominal interest rates, inflation, real interest rate, and risk is crucial for informed financial decisions. 5. Understanding currency movement and translation exposure is essential for businesses operating internationally. Lastly,